The hall of the Red Keep had never been quiet, not truly. The stone walls remembered every scream, every oath, every death that had ever happened within them. But on that night, it felt still, like the gods themselves were holding their breath. Ned Stark sat on the Iron Throne. He hadn't wanted it. Gods, he had never even imagined it. But Robert Baratheon was dead, a bloody mess of wine and boar tusks, and the realm needed someone, not another Lannister puppet, not a boy with golden hair and lion's teeth. The realm needed peace, and somehow that burden had fallen on him. The lords of the realm had gathered after the chaos of Robert's death. Jon Arryn gone, Renly fled, Stannis vanished like smoke into Dragonstone, and Cersei had played her hand too quickly. She had tried to crown her son, Joffrey, before Robert's body had even cooled. But Ned had the letter, the sealed will naming him protector of the realm, and more importantly, he had truth. Joffrey was not Robert's son. He had stood in front of the Iron Throne and said the words plainly, while Cersei hissed behind clenched teeth. The boy is not the king. He has no right to the throne. He expected steel. He expected death. But it never came. Because the City Watch, bribed though they were, had turned on the Lannisters. Perhaps gold held weight, but honor held memory. And the memory of Robert's true friend meant more in that moment than all of Cersei's promises. They dragged her away screaming. Joffrey, too. The look on the boy's face, a mixture of arrogance and disbelief, stayed with Ned for days after. And then, silence. A council was held, lords argued. Some demanded Stannis, others Renly. But neither were present, and the kingdom, already shaking from the storm of secrets and death, needed a face, a steady one. Mr. Pycelle had bowed before him, his voice trembling. "Lord Stark, the realm trusts you. You are not a southerner, you have no claim, that is why you are safe." It felt like a trap. It smelled like one too, but Ned had accepted. Not out of ambition, he never had that, but out of duty. He could not flee back to Winterfell while the realm tore itself apart, so now he sat on the Iron Throne. And nothing about it felt right. The metal was cold, sharp. It dug into his back no matter how he shifted, as if the swords of 1,000 enemies still whispered warnings into his bones. His hand gripped the armrest like it was a wolf's jaw, tight, defensive, ready to bite if needed. Varys approached softly, his footsteps as ghostly as ever. "You wear the crown, but not the smile, Your Grace," he said, voice light, eyes watchful. Ned didn't respond. "You've done what few ever could. You've tamed the lioness. The people sing already of your honor, but honor in this city—" Varys trailed off, shaking his bald head. "It is a fragile thread. I will not play their games, Varys." The spider bowed his head. "Then you must change the game, my king, or be devoured by it." Outside the hall, the sun had dipped behind the red walls. Shadows stretched long. Somewhere, a raven cried. In the north, Robb Stark sat in Winterfell, with the weight of a kingdom now shadowing his father. Sansa, still trapped in court, was a silent ghost among the courtiers, too afraid to speak, too proud to cry. Arya was missing, slipped from her lessons like a wisp of smoke. No one had seen her since the day Cersei was arrested, and Ned's heart bled with the fear of what the shadows might have done to her. He had won the crown, but he had already lost too much. A knock broke the stillness. It was Sir Barristan Selmy. "Your Grace," he said. "The council is ready." Ned nodded, rising slowly. His legs ached more than they used to. Each step down from the throne felt heavier. As he walked into the council chamber, all he could think of was Winterfell, the snow, the silence, the honesty of cold wind and howling wolves. But those days were gone. Now he was King Eddard Stark of House Stark, first of his name. And the game had only just begun. The council chamber smelled of ink, sweat, and something old, like rot hiding beneath perfume. The faces around the table were familiar, but not friendly. Petter Baelish, with that ever-coiled smile. Varys, unreadable. Grand Maester Pycelle dozing at intervals, pretending to be wiser than he was tired. Sir Barristan, stiff with loyalty. And Renly Baratheon, returned from Highgarden, smug and charming, already whispering alliances into ears that didn't ask for them. Ned took his seat at the head of the table. Not Robert's seat. That massive, throne-like chair had been removed. He'd ordered it gone. He wouldn't rule as Robert had, lounging like a drunk bear. He would sit like a man, clear-eyed, sober. "Let's begin," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a sword. Varys was first. "Riots in Flee. Bottom, your grace. The city is restless, bread is scarce, coins scarcer. They chant your name, but desperation is louder. Send food," Ned said. Baelish snorted. "And who will pay for it, your grace? Winterfell's snows? The treasury is as dry as Casterly Rock's mercy." Ned turned to him. "Is it not your job, Lord Baelish, to manage coin?" Petter smiled, like a man insulted by a child. "It is, and I manage what we have, but the Lannisters' gold was what kept the city fed. With Cersei in chains and Tywin Lannister sharpening his claws in the west, that supply is severed. So we beg the Lannisters." "No," Renly said suddenly, "we don't. The Reach has more than enough grain. The Tyrells owe me favors. I'll speak with them." "Will they listen?" Ned asked. Renly leaned forward, smug. "They always do." That was the thing. Everyone here had their game, their allies, their pawns. Ned had none. Winterfell was far. The bannermen in the north were loyal but slow. He had no gold, no spies, no seductions, only truth and steel. He dismissed the council early. There were too many lies spoken in that room, too many eyes that watched his every word, every blink. He needed air. As he walked the Red Keep's stone corridors, he passed the guards, his own now. Northern men. He had brought them down. From Moat Cailin and White Harbour after taking the crown. Not many, just enough to keep the wolves howling in the lion's den. But even they looked uneasy. This wasn't their home. The south was too warm, too loud, too treacherous. At the balcony overlooking the Blackwater, he paused. The sun dipped behind the city like it was ashamed to watch what came next. Below, ships moved like slow beetles over the water, and in the streets, smoke, more than before. He heard the door before he heard the voice. "You should have come home." It was Catelyn. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the deep bone exhaustion of someone who's seen too much and is still pretending it's fine. "I couldn't," he said, his voice soft. "You could have taken our daughters and left, let them fight over the throne. They were never going to stop fighting. And now you sit on a chair made of swords, and every blade points at you." He looked away. "Would you have me abandon it, the people?" She sighed. "I'd have you alive." They stood there in silence for a while. Wind blew her hair across her face. His hand twitched to brush it away, but he didn't. He didn't. Know how to be a husband and a king at the same time. Maybe no one could. "Robb writes daily," she said. "He misses you." "He's not a boy anymore." "No. And he shouldn't have to become a man this fast." A raven arrived that evening. Black wings, bad news. Ned opened it in silence. His eyes scanned the words. Then again. "What is it?" Catelyn asked. "Stannis," he said. "He's declared himself king, sent letters across the realm, claimed Cersei's children are bastards born of incest." Catelyn's face went pale. "But that's the truth," Ned said. "But truth doesn't win wars." A second raven came. An hour later, it was from the Westerlands. Tywin Lannister had raised his banners. By morning, King's Landing was a city breathing in panic. The bells rang, not for celebration, not for mourning, but as a warning. War was coming. Again. Ned stood over the war table. The carved map of Westeros sprawled out before him. It was old, nicked and burned in places, its borders blurred from generations of conflict. A crude wolf had been placed atop Winterfell, a stag on Dragonstone, and a lion now pressed its claws into the Riverlands. "They're moving fast," Sir Barristan muttered, frowning at the lion's token. "Tywin knows how to strike when the realm's weak." "He always did," Ned said. "He didn't need Cersei or Joffrey on the throne to start this war, just an excuse, and I gave it to him." Baelish entered without knocking, his mouth already halfway into a smirk. "The good news is, we still have the capital. The bad. The news is, well, we're surrounded by enemies, goldless and loved by almost no one. Shall I fetch the wine?" Ned ignored him. "Any word from the Vale?" Peter's grin widened. "Lisa Arryn sends you her prayers. And nothing else. She's a woman of nerves, and her Moondor is far more loyal than her knights." Ned didn't answer. He was staring at the token placed on the eyrie. An eagle, perched, but never flying. Lisa's silence wasn't new, but it stung all the same. Stannis's letters had spread like wildfire. He had branded Joffrey, Tommen and Myrcella as abominations, children of incest, born from Cersei and Jaime. Everyone knew it. Ned had spoken that truth himself, before the small council, but truth spoken by a king's hand was different than truth spoken by a claimant to the throne. Now the realm was being asked to choose sides, between a man who had seized the throne with honor and another who claimed it by law. Renly was furious. "He has no support," he roared in the council chamber later that day. "No men, no alliances. The lords of the Reach won't follow him. The Stormlands are fractured. Stannis is a shadow with a crown." "And yet he marches," Varys noted, fingers steepled. "Shadows can still cut deep, if they know where to strike." Renly's fists clenched. "Let me ride to Highgarden. The Tyrells will march for us. They hate Stannis more than they trust him." "You want to bring another army into the capital?" Ned asked. "And what happens when Renly Baratheon decides he should wear a crown too?" Renly met his eyes. "If I wanted the throne, I'd have taken it the day Robert died. I stood aside for you." That silenced the room. "I don't trust him," Catelyn said later, as she and Ned sat together in the quiet of their chambers. "Renly smiles too much, like someone who's already plotting something he won't say." "He may be arrogant," Ned said, "but he's not foolish. He knows this city will burn before it bows to Stannis. You can't hold the realm together alone, Ned. You need allies, real ones. I need peace." But the realm didn't want peace. It wanted fire and steel. That night, the first of Tywin's messages arrived, not by Raven, but by corpse. A northern patrol sent to the Riverlands. Captured, mutilated, their bodies dumped at the edge of the Blackwater, a golden lion carved into their chests. Ned stared down at the bodies in silence, his face unreadable. Sir Barristan stood beside him. "He wants us to strike first. He wants the North to commit fully, to march, so he can burn the Riverlands and say it was war." Ned's voice was quiet. "And what would you do?" Barristan was silent for a long time. "Then what Robert would do is not what I'd advise." "I'm not Robert," Ned said flatly. "No," the old knight said. "You're not." By dawn, Ned had sent 3 ravens, one to Robb, instructing him to ready the banners of the North, but not to march without command, one to River Run, seeking audience with Hoster Tully, his old ally, his wife's father, whose lands were now in the Lion's Path, and one to Stannis Baratheon. It was not a letter of surrender, but neither was it a letter of war. He offered something else, the truth, and a choice. But war doesn't wait for parchment. By the time the ravens reached their roosts, Tywin Lannister had already sacked 3 Tully villages, and Robb Stark had crossed the Neck with 30,000 northern men at his back. The campfires of Robb Stark's host stretched for miles beneath the southern stars. Thousands of men, wolves howling in the distance, steel clanking, fires crackling, war songs echoing through the darkness, and at the center of it all, a boy with his father's silence, but not yet his father's wisdom. Robb was 17 and already carried the weight of 1,000 dead futures. The letter from his father had not commanded war, only preparation, but the Riverlands were burning. The Lannisters had torn through the land like a sickness. Tully blood spilled in rivers, and the boy who had never left Winterfell had to choose between restraint and vengeance. He chose vengeance. When the news reached King's Landing, the council chamber fractured into chaos. "You told him to wait," Renly shouted. "I did," Ned said calmly. "Then why is the young wolf already crossing the Green Fork with half the north behind him?" "Because Lannister blades don't wait," Ned said. "Because the Riverlands are dying." Peter Baelish leaned forward, voice oily as ever. "So we have a war. On 3 fronts, Stannis, Tywin and the Reach, still undecided. And your son, marching with enough force to start a new rebellion." "It's not rebellion," Ned growled. "It's justice." "No," Baelish smiled. "It's blood." Ned dismissed the council early again. He could barely breathe in that chamber anymore. Every word felt like a trap, every smile a lie. Even Sir Barristan, loyal and firm, was starting to look at him with doubt. Later, in his solar, he read the reply from Stannis Baratheon. It was as cold and rigid as the man himself. "You are not the king. Robert had no right to name you such. The Iron Throne belongs to me by law and by blood. You claim to act with honor. Prove it. Step down. Bend the knee. And I will allow you to return to Winterfell with your name intact." Ned burned the letter. There was no alliance to be had with Stannis, only war and pride and fire. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He rode that night to the Tower of the Hand, where Catelyn waited. She had just returned from River Run, her eyes hollow, her face worn from tears. Hoster Tully was dying, and war had already reached his doorstep. "They want to name Robb king in the north," she said quietly. "The bannermen whisper it at night. They chant it behind tents. They see you on the Iron Throne, and they think, why not a Stark for all the kingdoms?" "He's a boy," Ned said. "So were you once. I wasn't marching through the south with thousands of men and the lion on my heels." Catelyn's voice cracked. "He didn't ask for this. None of us did." "I know," Ned said. "That's what makes it worse." Outside the window, King's Landing burned brighter than usual, not with fire but with tension. Unrest brewed daily, bread riots, guards killed in alleyways, Lannister loyalists whispering rebellion behind closed doors. Half the city thought Ned Stark a usurper, the other half hoped he'd save them. Neither side trusted the other, even Sansa had changed. She sat in silence at dinners, barely eating. Her eyes never met his anymore. She still wore the southern silks, still tried to smile when the ladies of court spoke to her, but something inside her had hardened. The softness Robert's court had nurtured was gone. She missed Joffrey and Arya. Arya was still missing. Varys believed she had fled into the city, disguised, perhaps with the help of Syrio Forel, her Braavosi swordmaster. Ned had his men searching, but every whisper turned to smoke. He feared the worst. Every night his dreams ended with her face, bruised, lost, cold. "You can't rule with a sword in your heart," Catelyn said softly behind him as they watched the city. "I don't know another way," Ned replied. The next day, a raven arrived from the twins, Walder Frey had offered passage to Robb for a price. A marriage, of course, one of Robb's choice, but only among Frey's many daughters. Ned grimaced at the thought, but he knew they needed the crossing. Every path forward required some compromise, and compromises in Westeros often bled. The day after, Renly was gone. Fled the city in the dead of night with his bannermen and knights of the Stormlands. Rumour said he'd ridden to Highgarden to forge a new claim. Perhaps a crown of his own. Perhaps just more chaos. By week's end, the War of 5 Kings had begun. Ned Stark was one of them, but he'd never asked for a crown, and deep down he knew if the wolves were howling now, it was only because winter was finally coming. The throne room was colder now. Maybe it was the absence of Robert's laughter. Maybe it was the wind creeping through the cracks in the Red Keep's ancient bones. Or maybe it was just the dread that followed Ned Stark like a shadow, long and unshakable. Messenger after messenger arrived. None brought comfort. From the Riverlands, Tywin Lannister had taken Harrenhal. Lord Tully's forces were scattered. Entire villages burned for sport. From the west, Jaime Lannister had marched out of Casterly Rock, heading toward Riverrun with 20,000 men. From the east, no reply from the Vale. Lysa still hid in her tower, feeding her son lies and fear. And from the south, the worst of all, Renly Baratheon had declared himself king, not in secret, not in whispers, in full pomp and splendor. A crown of golden roses, banners flying from Highgarden to Storm's End. With the might of the Reach behind him, Renly now claimed legitimacy over both Stannis and Ned. 5 kings, Catelyn muttered as she reread the Raven's words. 5 kings, and not one of them remembers the realm. I remember, Ned said quietly. I remember every man who will die for a crown none of them should wear. That day, Ned called a closed meeting with Sir Barristan and Varys. No Baelish, no Pycelle, no courtiers, only those who still knew what loyalty meant. We cannot hold the capital, Ned said. Not if the Lannisters reach the gates before Robb does. Varys folded his hands. Then perhaps the capital should be thinned. Ned frowned. Explain. The Lannisters hold sway over half this city's merchants and gold. Their spies outnumber your own. Their whispers feed the flames of rebellion. Quietly, Your Grace, we remove them. Assassination, justice, disguised as accident. Sir Barristan stirred, uncomfortable. That is not the way of a Stark. No, Ned agreed, it isn't. But that night, 6 prominent Lannister sympathizers were arrested. No public charges, no trials, just silence, vanishings, a reminder that the wolf's teeth were sharp, even when hidden behind words. By the 3rd day, the riots began again, not because of the arrests, but because of the food. The grain from the Reach had never arrived. Renly had cut it off, a political move, clean and clever. He starved the city without drawing a blade. In the streets, the people cried for bread. In the taverns, they cried for blood. And in the throne room, Sansa cried too. They're saying you're no better than Cersei, she told him, eyes red. That you lie, that you kill in the dark. I do what I must to protect the realm, Ned said, even if it damns me. Sansa looked away. Joffrey wouldn't have let them starve. Ned's breath caught. He didn't respond. Later that night he visited the dungeons. Cersei Lannister sat in the shadows, chains loose on her wrists, not because of mercy, but because no one dared touch her more than necessary. She was venom wrapped in silk. You've lost the city, she said when he entered. No, Ned replied. I've saved it from you. You've traded 1 war for 5. You've killed the king and made a dozen more. Your son was no king, he was a monster. She laughed. Then what does that make your daughter who loved him? A traitor or a fool? Ned stepped closer. Where is Arya? Cersei's smile faded for a breath, just enough to confirm his fear. "She escaped," she said. "But how far can a wolf pup run in a city full of lions?" Ned left her. There, her laughter following him like a curse down the stone halls. By the next morning, he received word from Robb. The young wolf had crossed the Trident, the Freys had opened the gates, and Jaime Lannister had ridden out to crush him. But Robb had not faced him head-on. Instead, he had marched west and taken Jaime's rearguard by surprise at the Whispering Wood. The Kingslayer had been captured. A roar of disbelief echoed through the Red Keep when the news spread. Jaime Lannister, chained like a common, prisoner. The Lion of the Rock brought low by a boy with ice in his veins. The people cheered, but Ned didn't, because with Jaime in chains, Tywin would rage, and when lions rage, they don't roar, they tear. The sun over King's Landing rose blood-red the day the Kingslayer arrived in chains. He was paraded through the streets, dirty, bruised and smirking, the same smug grin that had followed him through a dozen battlefields, 100 murders, and now into captivity. The people shouted, cursed, pelted him with rotten fruit. Some praised King Eddard, others demanded Jaime's head, but Ned Stark gave no orders. He watched from the balcony as Robb's men escorted their prize through the gate. Grey Wind stalked. Behind them, tall and silent, his eyes locked on the lion. Robb rode beside Jaime, stiff and cold, so much like Ned himself it made his heart twist. A boy no more, a Stark of the North. The realm saw a warrior, a prince of war. Ned saw his son, tired, scarred, and far too young to carry this much blood on his hands. They met in the Tower of the Hand, just the two of them. No lords, no banners. "You disobeyed me," Ned said without anger, but not without weight. "I won," Robb replied. Ned nodded slowly. "You did." Robb looked older, not in years, but in the way men do after they've buried too many brothers. His hands were calloused, his armor dented, his eyes distant. "They crowned me," he said, "at the Twins. The bannerman." "I know. I didn't ask for it." "I know." Silence fell between them, broken only by the muffled voices of soldiers outside. "I don't want to be king, father," Robb said, "but I won't let the lions take another step toward our home." "You already are king," Ned replied. "Whether you want it or not." Jaime Lannister was placed in the dungeons below. The Red Keep, the same cells where Ned had once rotted under Robert's orders, broken and betrayed. Now he stood on the other side of the bars, staring at the man who'd murdered a king and called it duty. "Still think I'm the villain, Stark?" Jaime asked, grinning through bloodied teeth. "Now that you wear the crown?" "You murdered Eris, a madman. You stabbed your sworn king in the back. I saved a city. What have you done lately, Your Grace?" Ned said nothing. He didn't need to. Guilt was a language men like Jaime understood only when it was silent. But even in chains, the Kingslayer was dangerous, not with a sword, but with his name, his blood, the lion's pride, and Tywin would not let him rot. By week's end, another raven arrived from the Westerlands. This time there were no demands, only a threat: "Release my son, or I will burn every river between River Run and King's Landing. I will fill the mouths of crows with northern flesh. I will flay the Tullys and hang their bones from my gates. Your crown cannot protect your blood, nor your children." It was signed in red ink, sealed with gold. Catelyn read it and said nothing for a long time. Then, "We should have killed him. I gave my word." Then break it, like they would. But Ned had already broken enough of himself. The next day, Robb proposed a prisoner exchange. Jaime Lannister for Arya, if she still lived. And Sansa too, if Cersei dared to use her as a shield. Cersei sent no reply, only silence, and silence always meant a plan. It was Varys who finally brought the whispers. "She's not in the city anymore," he said. "Arya, the trail ends near the harbour. A Braavosi ship sailed 2 weeks ago under false papers." Ned's eyes narrowed. "You helped her?" Varys offered a rare truth. She was not safe here, and you were not ready to lose her, so I made sure you didn't have to. Where did she go? To where wolves run free. Ned breathed, deeply torn between fury and gratitude. Arya was alive, that was enough, but Sansa remained, and now she was Cersei's only leverage. You should never have brought us here, Catelyn told him one night as they stood in the godswood behind the keep. This city eats good men. I thought I could change it. You thought honor could tame vipers. The moon overhead flickered behind clouds. The wind rustled through the weirwood leaves, and Ned realized something he hadn't admitted, not even to himself. He was winning the war, but he was losing the kingdom. Because for every Lannister bannerman defeated, another lord questioned his rule. For every victory Robb earned, new enemies gathered, Renly in the south, Stannis sharpening his sword on Dragonstone, Tywin ever marching. The crown on his head felt heavier by the hour, and then came the news that shattered everything. From the east, Viserys Targaryen was dead, and his sister, Daenerys Stormborn, had hatched dragons. Dragons! The word didn't feel real when it first left the Raven's parchment. Ned read the report once, then again, and again, each time slower, more carefully, as if clarity might erase the madness. But the message remained the same. Daenerys, Targaryen, last of her line, has hatched 3 dragons from stone. The Maester who'd sent the report had burned his own seal into the parchment, a trusted agent from Braavos. No room for doubt. Catelyn sat across from him, her face pale. It's a lie. I wish it were. Dragons are gone, Ned. Gone for 100 years. They were. Until now. The council meeting that followed was the most divided yet. No mention of war, no talk of Tywin or Robb or Renly, just dragons. This changes everything, said Pycelle, trembling. 3 dragons, Your Grace. 3. If it is true, then the girl is a threat beyond any crown. She is across the world, Ned said coldly. The free cities may bend to her, but Westeros is not hers to claim. But it was, Baelish added slyly, before Robert, before your rebellion, and dragons have a way of rewriting history and lighting it on fire. She's a child, Ned argued. Her brother's death may have freed her, but she has no army, only fire and myth. Varys finally spoke, his voice softer than usual. And myth, my king, is what births rebellion. The decision tore at Ned's soul. Robert would have sent an assassin, Tywin would have sent gold, Renly would have done both, but Ned sent a raven, not a blade, not a threat, just words. The Iron Throne bears you no malice. The war in Westeros is not yours to fight, but should you set foot upon these shores with fire in your hands, you will be treated not as queen, but as conqueror. No response came, not in words, but whispers began to float from Essos, of Dothraki warbands forming, of sellswords paid in gold and dragonbone, of ships vanishing from Korth to Pentos, of cities bending the knee before they even saw her face. Ned knew then that winter was not the only storm coming, and yet the present still bled. Sansa was brought before the court that same week. Cersei, through channels unknown, had secured her release, not out of kindness, but calculation. The Queen's allies were thinning, her influence nearly gone. This move was strategic, a temporary surrender to regain leverage elsewhere. Sansa stood before her father, thinner than he remembered. Her eyes no longer sparkled. She didn't run to him, didn't cry, she only curtsied. Your Grace, she said, like he was a stranger. Catelyn embraced her, but Sansa barely responded. She's not broken, Catelyn whispered later that night, but she's different. She was a girl when we came here, Ned said. Now she's a survivor. In the north, Robb's victories stacked higher. Jaime remained imprisoned, but the war dragged on. The riverlands were scarred. Riverrun still held, but barely. And Tywin had vanished from the battlefield. Ned didn't like it. Tywin Lannister didn't hide. He hunted. But soon the truth emerged. Tywin hadn't gone west. He hadn't gone north. He had gone south to join Renly Baratheon. The announcement hit King's Landing like wildfire. An alliance of convenience. A marriage between House Tyrell and House Lannister, with Margaery Tyrell promised to Joffrey despite his bastard birth. The Tyrells would overlook bloodlines in exchange for power. And Renly, surrounded by lions and roses, now marched on King's Landing. Stannis had responded the only way he knew how, with fire. Reports arrived of a strange priestess from the east, whispering of a Lord of Light, and one night, without warning, Renly Baratheon was dead. Murdered in his tent by shadows, they said. By magic. Varys confirmed it with haunted eyes. Stannis has become something else. Not a man. A prophecy, and those who follow prophecies are often the first to burn others on their behalf. The southern host scattered. The Tyrells retreated to Highgarden. The Lannisters, unbent, turned north. King's Landing had been spared, but not by strategy, by sorcery. Ned hated it, all of it. Too many kings, too many crowns, too much fire in the world, and not enough honor left to put it out. And now, as the winds grew colder, he found himself standing alone at the top of the Red Keep, overlooking a city that had never accepted him, but now bowed before him in fear. He had won battles, he had captured enemies, he had worn the crown, without letting it devour him. But even wolves tire, and winter was coming, from across the sea and beneath the ground. Winter did not announce itself with snow, not in King's Landing. It arrived with silence, the kind that filled the streets. After too many battles, after too many kings had died, and none had brought peace, the air was heavy, the sea winds colder, crows gathered in greater numbers atop the septs and gates, as if they knew something the realm didn't. Ned Stark stood at the center of it all, surrounded by a kingdom that now knelt. Not because they believed in him, but because they feared everyone else more. Robb still held the Riverlands, stronger than ever. Jaime Lannister remained a prisoner, his pride eroding in the cold stone dungeons of the Red Keep. Tywin had retreated to Casterly Rock after Renly's death, and the Tyrells, wounded by betrayal and loss, had gone quiet in Highgarden. Stannis was marching north from Dragonstone, dragging his shadowed god behind him. And across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen had begun to speak openly of reclaiming her family's throne. The kingdoms were shattered, and peace, though bought with blood, was temporary at best. That morning, Ned received a raven that changed everything. From the wall, Winterfell has fallen, Torrhen Square burns, the dead do not stay dead. The Night's Watch rides to defend the realms of men, but our numbers are too few. Your brother rides for the north. If the realm still has a king, it must remember the threat beyond the wall. It was signed by Jon Snow. No longer a boy, no longer a bastard. A commander in truth, if not yet in title. Ned read the letter 3 times. The words blurred with memory. The north. His brother Benjen. Missing? The wall. Old stories whispered by firelight, of white shadows and eyes like ice. He'd thought it all myth, but myths were breathing again in this world. Dragons, shadows, and now the dead. Catelyn came to him before nightfall, her voice strained, but firm. "You have to go." "I'm the king," Ned said. "I can't abandon the capital." "You are a Stark," she said. "And the North needs you more than this throne ever did." He didn't argue, because he felt it too. That pull in his bones, that old ache only the snow could heal. The South had twisted everything, corrupted every truth. But in the North, things were still simple. Life, death, ice, blood. Before dawn, he summoned the council one last time. They protested, of course. Pycelle nearly fainted. Varys raised no objection, only bowed. Petyr Baelish smiled thinly, perhaps hoping the city would tear itself apart in his absence. But Ned didn't care. He named Sir Barristan Selmy as protector of the realm in his stead. He left instructions with Catelyn and Robb. The war would pause, not end, but pause, long enough to see whether the North could hold. Before he left, he visited the Godswood one last time. The weirwood tree had been transplanted years ago, small and unnatural in the southern sun, but its red leaves still whispered. He knelt. "I did what I could," he murmured, "and it was never enough." He left with a dozen northern riders and 2 direwolves. Catelyn kissed him with salt on her lips. Sansa clung to his arm but didn't beg him to stay. She understood now, in the way children are forced to understand when the world refuses to. Wait. He rode for Winterfell, for Jon, for the Wall, and behind him the throne sat empty, for now, but in the shadows whispers stirred. Cersei Lannister, freed in secret by agents unknown, had vanished from her cell. Varys watched the ports, more carefully than ever, and a merchant from the east had arrived with a cage covered in cloth. Inside it, something that hissed and smoked and was not of this world. The Game of Thrones hadn't ended. It had only changed shape. Ned Stark would ride into snow and silence, into stories few believed anymore. But even as he left the Red Keep, behind something followed him. Not men, not armies, but fate. Because in a world of fire and lies, sometimes the only truth left is the one written in cold. And winter had finally come.